everyone. Welcome back to the Urban League of Rochester's monthly Interrupt Racism Speaker Series. I am so happy to see so many of you joining us today to hear about this really important topic that we're going to be discussing. And I hope you are all well and savoring the first real taste of summer that we've had in a long time. Finally, our 6 months of winter seems to be over. But for those of you I do not know as yet, I'm Candace Lucas, and I have the privilege to serve as the Senior Vice President, leading the Equity and Advocacy Initiatives at the Urban League of Rochester. I'm joined by my colleague, Shannon Riegelsberger, who will be assisting with our technology and monitoring the chat. I also want to introduce Mariana Deole, who's going to be helping us with the slides today. She's our Civic Engagement and Navigation Specialist. Now, as you may know, the Urban League of Rochester is one of 93 affiliates of the National Urban League, and we are committed to upholding the civil and human rights of everyone in our community. And one way we do that is to hold space for open and respectful dialogue around difficult conversations. This helps us deepen our understanding and build connections that drive collective progress. So in today's session, we welcome speakers from the ROC Community Table to discuss their thought paper named Claiming a Seat at the Table, a New Dream for Monroe County. They will share insights from their work across critical areas of equity and justice in our city. And those are going to include diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, yes, I said it, education, environment, healthcare, homelessness, and immigration. And they're going to explore how these interconnected issues impact Monroe County's most marginalized communities. As we get started today, I ask that you introduce yourselves by putting your name and the reason you're here today in the chat. We are very interested in building community, and this is one way that we're going to be able to do that. So please put your name in the chat. And just what brought you to this session today, whether it's your first time or whether you're returning. We just want to know a little bit about that. We want to make sure that we are meeting your expectations for these discussions and that we're bringing content that's relevant to you as well. So that is going to help us. As you do that, I'm going to introduce our speakers today from the ROC Community Table. We're going to hear from Sid Bell. She's the co-director of Our Local History at CCSI, and she is a proven DEI leader and an experienced program facilitator. You're going to hear from Mr. Glenn Sarasoletti. He's the Assistant Dean and Director of the U of R Center for Community Engagement. Ms. Melissa Carlson. She's an architect, and she's a member of the Rochester Third Act Elders. You're going to hear from Mr. Thomas, let me correct myself quickly, Dr. Thomas Green, who's a retired Jordan Health COO, and he's also a healthcare CART co-facilitator. So remember the RAISE Commission that we speak about. He's one of the co-facilitators of that. And we have Sister Beth LaValle from the Sisters of St. Joseph, and Ms. Jenna Cohen, who's joining us from Catholic Charities. She's the Donor Relations Manager, and she's also the CEO and founder of Neighborly Network Media. So as we prepare to turn the discussion over to the table members, and also I will be assisting with the table as well, I'd like to remind you that the Urban League of Rochester is a nonpartisan 501c3 organization. So the views and opinions expressed by the speakers, including myself and any attendees, do not represent the Urban League of Rochester necessarily, and they will be attributed to that speaker alone. However, as a civil rights organization, we do respect the right to free speech, and we serve as a safe place to express individual perspectives respectfully. So I ask that you please ensure your mics are muted to prevent any background noise or private conversations from distracting from our presenters' remarks. And we encourage you to use the reaction buttons if something resonates with you, clap, put hearts, whatever you choose. And please also engage fully in the chat. So we are going to hold questions until the end, but we don't want you to lose your thought. So if you hear something, if you have a thought, please go ahead and put that right in the chat, and we will get back to it because we will have ample time for Q&A at the end. Okay? All right. So with that, I'm going to ask for the slides, Mariana, and we will jump right in. Awesome. So this first slide, this is just a picture of various members of the table. And I'll just tell you a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. So for those of you who may not be aware, the table is an organically grown, open group of individuals who have been meeting since November 2024. Right after the last elections, there was concern based on rhetoric and things that we had heard during the campaign cycle, and community members wanted to get together and just start thinking about how is our community going to be impacted and how do we start preparing for it. And so since 2024, the table has been meeting on a weekly basis every Friday from 2 to 3:30 to discuss critical matters that affect our community. And you can see those include education, health and human services, immigration, policing, environmental justice, LGBTQ+ and women's rights, Native sovereignty, and of course, DEI, and a myriad of other social justice issues. Next slide, please. So the table represents a diverse group of individuals. Our first meeting, we started with about 14 people. We are now well over 150, pushing on 170 members. And it is a great cross-section of our community. Here you can see the various sectors that are represented, from arts and culture, civil rights, education, media, legal, philanthropy. Various sectors are participating. Individuals are also able to just represent themselves, right? So community members are welcome to the table. You do not have to be affiliated with an organization. You do not have to be affiliated with any specific sector. If you are a concerned citizen and you want to be a part of these conversations, you are more than welcome to join us. Next slide, please. Our mission is to unite community leaders, advocates, and organizations in a collaborative effort to anticipate and address challenges and opportunities arising from changes in U.S. policy directives. So as I said, this was, right after we started learning about some of the policy directives that were coming down, the attacks on DEI, the attacks on our immigrant community, a number of different things, whether or not the Department of Education was going to be dismantled, all of those things, the community, we wanted to get together and start discussing that because we want to protect the rights, the well-being, and the dignity of our community by developing proactive strategies, promoting equitable policies, and continuing services all Monroe County residents need to thrive, right? So we say we stand together. So we've done that through these 4 objectives. We review, resist, repair, and rebuild. And I'll just talk to you a little bit about those. So when we say review, we're reviewing policy impacts. We review everything that comes out. We started out by reviewing Project 2025. We reviewed the executive orders. We consulted with attorneys that are part of our teams just to understand what we were reading, hearing, learning about. We want to make sure that we are as informed as possible as table members and as a community. And then we said, we want to resist unjust policies, right? Things that go against the fabric of what Rochester, Monroe County is. And so that means we want to mobilize our community when we're hearing things that aren't correct, when we are feeling things that aren't right. We want to mobilize our community so that we can speak out against that and advocate for what we hold dear as a community. We want to repair harm. We know that new harm is being caused to some people by some of the policy directives that are coming down, but we don't want to forget the historic harm that was done as well. So we continue to look at how do we repair relationships for historically marginalized communities, as well as repair relationships that are being damaged currently. And then in the end, we want to rebuild and create a new Rochester, Monroe County. So we are not just advocating to go back to what we had before, because we have stated very emphatically that what we had before, we know did not serve all people in all ways either. And so we really want to take the opportunity in what some may think is a crisis and rebuild a Rochester that is truly equitable to all. Next slide, please. So since 2024, the first thing we said is, if we want to think about policy, if we want to figure out how to change things, we've got to meet with the decision makers, the policy makers, the elected officials, the community leaders. And so we have done that. So you'll see this, long list of people that we have been meeting with on a weekly basis, sometimes multiple times, to discuss, first, what were their thoughts around the policies? And then we also want them to hear what our suggestions are and our recommendations are, which is what you're going to be hearing about today as well. And we wanted to make sure that as we were in front of some of these elected officials and policymakers, that we really did have the voice of more community members as well. So as I said, we are, close to 170 strong that have been participating weekly, but we know that this is a county of 750,000. And so we want to hear from as many voices as possible. Next slide, please. And so before we jump in, I just want to state this again. I think it bears repeating. The Urban League of Rochester, we are proud to convene the ROC Community Table, but we are a 501c3 nonpartisan organization. So we do not take any particular side. Our goal is to raise the issues and the voices from individuals so that they can just be heard a little louder. Okay, we fight to defend democracy, and we believe in the right to free speech as a pillar of democracy. We serve as a safe place for difficult conversations, but any comments made by attendees, including myself, are attributed to that individual alone. Next slide. And then the way we are able to have these conversations, these difficult conversations, is through a shared agreement that we have with each other and that we would like to share with you as well, so that we build that with you. We want to respect and follow the process. And so we, asked, please put your questions in the chat. We'll do that. We ask that whatever process we develop, we all follow that and respect it. We understand that we're all learners here. So, there is knowledge on this call that we want to hear from. So all voices are welcome in a respectful way. We want to trust intent and name impact. So just in case something lands on you in a way that causes harm to you in some way, please name that, right? We want to understand what it is that was said and how it came across, but please trust that the intent was not to do harm. We want to listen to understand and not just respond. So please take a moment, be curious about what you're hearing, and so that we can have a good conversation about that. Take space and make space. We always try to make sure that we have room for all voices to be included. We always expect and accept non-closure. We may not agree at the end of the day, and that's okay. It is okay to disagree. And so we just come into the space with let's expect and accept that we're not always going to hear what we want to hear. But it doesn't mean that we have to be enemies at the end of the day. It doesn't mean that we're going to cancel each other. We're going to continue to work together. And then finally, what's said here stays here, what's learned here leaves here. And that's just so that we respect the confidentiality of the space that we're in. Nobody wants to hear their name being used to say, oh, Candace said such and such, right? So definitely, if you learn something, go ahead, take that back, but please respect the confidentiality of the individual speaking. And so with that, we're going to jump into what was written in the spot paper. And just to give you a little bit, this came from the table after reading, Project 2025 and hearing the different plans saying, well, where's our plan for for a better, more equitable Rochester. And so table members over the last year have been putting their thoughts to paper. And so we've developed this paper, this thought paper, that includes a little bit of history around each of the topics we're going to talk about, some of the harm that we're seeing happen, our suggestions for what should be done differently. So you're going to get just a snippet of each of those, as each of our presenters is just going to speak for about 5 minutes or so, but we really want it to be enough for you to understand where we're coming from and be able to give some feedback on it. So you'll hear from Sid Bell on DEI, Glenn on education, Melissa on environment, Dr. Green, healthcare, Sister Beth on homelessness, and Jenna on immigration. And then we will take questions at the end. All right, so with that, I'll turn it over to Sid.
Thanks so much, Candace, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm so excited to be representing our sub-team today. So thank you to all of our DEI sub-team members who worked on this paper together and all the community members who made their voices heard as we developed it as well. So we're going to go over, like Candace said, a really kind of quick hit, but want to give you a little bit of what we talked about, how we got to this place where we built the paper, what it looks like, and some of the details in it. And like Dr. Lucas said at the end, if you have any questions, we're happy to share more. And when the full paper comes out, we're really happy to continue the conversation as well. So we can go on to the next slide. So all of our articles within this paper are broken down into these 4 areas that we have talked about that Dr. Lucas covered right at the beginning. We also started with context, with the understanding of knowing that maybe folks across our community aren't as familiar with diversity, equity, and inclusion, don't always know exactly what it means, knowing that there's been a lot of conversation around it, not just within the last couple of years, but well before that as well, around what does it mean in practice and who's actually included in it. So in the context part of our paper, we talked about Rochester's history of civil rights advocacy around Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony, as well as I would be remiss not to talk about, for the Our Local History work, several members of our community who are still with us who really shaped the work that we do around civil rights in our area. We also talked about the federal laws. So really thinking about who has been historically excluded from spaces and knowing that marginalized identity groups, these spaces were not built for us. And so part of the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is making sure we recognize and write that going forward. So we talked about that. And again, really naming who is included in that group and making sure we're actively making space for that. We went on to review to think about what have the executive orders been, not just in 2025 when the new administration took office, but also when they took office the first time not the first time in 2020, but throughout that first tenure, and really understanding what has built up to this point and what has the impact of those executive orders been. So we name them, we do kind of a little bit of a deep dive on them, just so there's an understanding of what they're trying to tear down within the context of what has been built, again, over time, over the last several decades. From there, we go on to repair and really thinking about part of the challenge that we found with diversity, equity, and inclusion work is a lack of consistency in language and definitions. So we wanted to name that and call that out and know that this paper does not solve for that, but it calls it out in an effort for folks who do this work, who practice this work and bring it into our spaces, that is something we really need to come together on if we're going to create something that is more solid and understood across the many different spaces. We know that diversity, equity, and inclusion is threaded through absolutely everything that we do. So being able to speak to that clearly and consistently is really important to how we do this going forward, knowing that we do adapt and change over time. We also talk about what the kind of opportunity is and the value is in embedding this into our policies and practices across all of the industries that we're part of, our workplaces, and within our communities. And finally, the last part of our article really talked about what the work requires from us, and we named and defined what we mean by decision makers, and thinking about anybody that is leading or part of a group that's over 3 people, and thinking about how do we make sure that those decision makers across many different spaces are aware of what their opportunity and obligation is around what it means to embed equitable practices in their work at all of the different levels that they occupy and the different places that they kind of oversee. We also talked about what is necessary of all of us as community members to understand what this work looks like for us as individuals and what it means for us as a collective community. So we got pretty explicit in what we're asking both of decision makers and from our community members. Go on to the next one. Oops. Just kidding. I'll just close really quickly with saying that, oh, there we go. Yeah, the next one. Awesome. So we also had an opportunity to bring together diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals across our area 3 separate times to listen to them, learn from them, and really understand what it was that they were facing in their work environments and in their communities. We also saw that number significantly drop within the last, from our second to third session within about a 6-month period. And so that was really significant for us to take in and understand. So what we did learn throughout all of those conversations is what you see on the screen there, and thinking about who was missing, what kind of programs we really want to focus on, and how do we make sure that the loss and the cost due to this attack on DEI, what is that really doing to our community and our marginalized identity groups and our community members at large, and also thinking about who needs to be involved in this conversation going forward. And then finally, who we want to make sure is part of this conversation kind of going forward from here is all listed right there. Again, everybody from those that are doing the work programmatically, in their work environments, to those who set the tone and really make space for those new policies and practices within their organizations, and who all needs to be involved in that. So thank you so much for your time. And again, thank you for being here. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thanks so much, Sid. Again, I'm Glenn Sarsoletti, and I've been grateful to participate in the ROC Community Table since March of 2025, and I'm honored today to share with you the thinking of the education subgroup. And before I proceed, I want to clarify that early in the meetings of the education subgroup, we began thinking about the scope or the focus of what we would define by education. And while in our initial conversations, we contemplated it including post-secondary or higher education, we ultimately decided to focus on pre-K through 12 education as an area that's most in need of focus and in need of being supported during this time, and creating a new system that's not to deny the importance of post-secondary education, especially as a partner in that work as well. Let's move on to the next slide. And so we approach this work in thinking about wanting to articulate some guiding principles for how our community could achieve and advance equity in educational outcomes. And those are elaborated on this slide, so I'll review them. First, our educational system, we believe, must be rooted in principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, founding principles in which our republic was founded. And that these would empower learners with analytical skills to understand societal limitations, and as well as the creative thinking to find their purpose. Second, the economy and quality of life in our community and the region more broadly rise and fall with the quality of each school district. And so we must recognize the equal humanity of all children across Monroe County. Third, education must intentionally direct resources to identify and remove obstacles, specifically intergenerational poverty and racism, that hinder students' ability to learn. Next, the quality of education offered to any child in the Rochester region should not be predictable based on the zip code of the community in which that child resides. So the opportunity should be accessible to all. And finally, beyond just academic achievement or preparation for career outcomes, we believe that education is a lifelong process of cultivating ethical citizens who think critically, act empathetically, and contribute to the greater good in a pluralistic world. So these are the guiding principles that the education subgroup has articulated that we believe should inform decision making in outcomes by decision makers across our county. Next slide, please. In reviewing the effects of policy changes, we identified the estimated funding cuts um, across New York State. There could be a loss of $538 million under proposed budget cuts, and local districts would be affected by that. Most notably, the city school district was at risk of losing $14 million in funding. And for example, among suburban districts would be affected as well. Greece would be at risk of losing 1.2 million and Webster nearly $500,000. So effects of proposed cuts would be felt across the county. And in addressing those inequities and healing systemic harms, we identified the following strategies to resist and repair the effects of those policy changes. First, to resist unjust policies, we advocate standing against any federal or local policy shifts that promote social exclusion and control, such as threats to cut Title I and DEI funding. Second, to repair historical harms. And we review in our section of the paper a long history of anti-literacy laws, forced assimilation, and redlining that created the current separate and unequal system of education in Monroe County. Third, we believe that proportional investment needs to be made because barriers to learning are more prevalent in communities affected by systemic racism. Therefore, the financial investment to remove those barriers must be proportionally greater in urban districts. Next, increased state funding for equity. We believe that we need to advocate for increased state funding to cover expected shortfalls in special education and other critical services due to federal cuts. And of course, that has been much on our minds and in the news recently with the state budget process moving forward. And finally, protecting the vulnerable. We advocate that New York State pass the state shield laws for educators regarding DEI and established emergency response networks for students impacted by federal immigration enforcement agents. Next slide, please. So in terms of recreating a new system, we recognize that the system that we had prior to this was much in need of reform and recreating. And so these five action steps that we recommend are toward creating a system, a more equitable system of education across the county. First, we promote regional collaboration, convening district leaders across the county to share resources and amend state laws to make the city school district a component district of the BOCES to ensure that urban districts have the same, students have the same access to services as suburban peers. Second, achieving regional education goals and promoting that district leaders across Monroe County would establish regional goals and share dedication to work collaboratively to achieve those goals. That we uphold high standards for all and advocating for our New York State regents to maintain those high standards as those outlined in the Portrait of a Graduate. And we engaged with our state regents and got their input in our discussions to formulate a comprehensive education rather than just immediate workforce participation. We advocate for culturally responsive staffing and increasing the linguistic, ethnic, and racial diversity of professional staff to ensure that all schools provide outstanding, culturally affirming education. And lastly, expanded vocational access for city school district vocational training. So at least 40% of middle and high school students can access vocational training supported by increased state funding. So that's a summary of our educational section of the white paper, and I'll pass it on to our next presenter.
Hi, I'm Melissa. We can start with our next slide. The review portion of our work is that the environment is being actively harmed at the federal level as it's only being considered resources for humans and corporations. The environment has awareness and some controversial legislation beginning at the state level, and we do have departments working to do good things at the city and county levels. The resist part is that state and local actions have to make up for federal lack. So that's what we're looking at. And the way things are rolling out, there's a lot of legislation. So we're a little bit differently in the other groups that we're pushing for a lot of legislation that's in process or rolling through, coming up. Citizens and businesses need to be aware of what progress the state, county, city, or municipality is making. You don't have to know every clause in a program, but to be aware it is there and that we, as the public, have opportunities for input. New York is, or was, better, a leader in climate, but now there's a lot of industry pressure to slow things down, so legislation isn't passing or being fulfilled, like the changes in our climate law, the CLCPA. We do have a green amendment, but it isn't motivating. There are a couple of bills, packaging reduction and the bottle bill did not get asked for a vote. They've been around for 3 years, but each time legislation, the lobbyists have pushed them farther and farther away from getting passed, even though the public is very much in favor of them. Industry, unfortunately, does not like change because it's not profitable, but having no change is unrealistic. Some things that have gotten passed and in our budget just recently, solar provisions, thermal energy networks like geothermal, and some home weatherization in the budget. And just last night, a data center moratorium for a year got passed in the legislation. Now it's on to the governor's desk. There are big non-governmental organizations that have research to share and help coordinate as we are all part of the ecosystem of Earth. Water is important as it's finite, and we are in a very water-rich area. Next slide. There is the County Adaptation and Resilience Plan that is working for the impacts of climate change here. Drought, heat, cold, flood, and wind. We're all familiar with those, but now you can put extreme in front of each of those because nothing is normal anymore forever. I heard a statement saying that God may forgive you, but Mother Nature won't. And we're kind of at that point that we're suffering a lot from previous happenings, and that's why we're adapting and mitigating. We have an equity, the CARP includes an equity plan to help those most vulnerable, as hazards don't hit us all equally. So that's one thing we recognize. Storm Ready is a national plan that makes sure the county has staff, technology, and planning to deal with emergencies. So we're doing good at keeping up with that. There are plans for the multimodal transit to include cars, buses, bicycles, and pedestrians, bike lanes, and transit center. So that again needs more public input. Where do you have buses? The county plan says we're a public transit rich area, and I looked at that and said, I don't think so. There's a lot of struggles I'm hearing. So that's our opportunities for public input. The agriculture plan does look at farms because the county does have a lot of farmland, and they're looking at economics to protect farming, protect open space and water, and they also include urban agriculture. That is a multi-level thing because the state helps with some funding and it goes on to schools too. So a lot of levels each way. The organic waste diversion is working on collecting food waste from large producers for compost instead of landfill because our landfills are finite and are filling up. The community benefit agreements are negotiated legally binding agreements between a developer and the residents of an area about what benefits the community will receive from the development. Don't just plop down buildings and evict the residents. Next slide. at the city. There's a lot of planning that has happened for the built areas of Rochester, preserving and enhancing open space. The city code has changed and is changing again. Vacuum oil, soil remediation is beginning, and corporations that have harmed us in the back, we need to set regulations on how they can help clean up and how bring positive impact. There's a large number of environmental advocacy groups trying to engage with grassroots, and we didn't know about each other and coordinate and be able to work with our local governments to, again, pass more legislation to keep us going. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Dr. Thomas Green, and I want to speak to you a little bit about healthcare this afternoon. I want to start with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King that says, "Of all forms of inequity, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and the most inhumane because it often results in physical death." This is pretty emphatic for me. I want to start with just sharing my week very quickly, which I think I went to every one of the large hospitals in Rochester to visit someone. I ended up at nursing home, and it wasn't on purpose, but it certainly drove home the reality of healthcare. And as we look at what we have in Rochester, particularly the world-class institutions such as URMC and Rochester Regional Health, we know that we're rich in institutions and people helping. I think about places like the FQHCs that we have in Rochester, Common Ground Health, and many other organizations that I won't have the time to mention. But that is what we look at in terms of what our review of our area is. The disparities that happen. We talk about the life expectancy, but there are many other chronicle areas that we need to highlight as well. And so that's what we're here for, and that's what we work hard. I want to acknowledge our committee who has been working on this paper. Went from a 2-page to a 5-page. So we're working on trying to get that down and get everything there. Next slide. So our committee was able to work on a diagram that we wanted to get out, and it was because of the impeding 2027 federal overhaul that existed that put in some of the restrictions, and we wanted people to be ready. And so as the ACA subsidies expired, premium increases, and many other changes that were happening, and the workforce visa barrier was very concerning because as the new administration was trying to reduce the amount of people who could come to our country to help us and some of the financial barriers that they were coming up against. We wanted to make sure that we put something in place that would help people. And I hope that at the end of this, there it is, Shannon would share with you what this diagram has in it. And so you can look at what we have in there in terms of understanding the new rules, the 2026 action plan that we ask people, and then finding help and resources, which includes 211. And I can't read the website right now, but mywayfinder.org. Thank you. So we put this together and hope that you would circulate this so that other people will have access and that you'll be able to help other people as they prepare for some of the changes. Next slide. So for the average healthcare user, New York State structured shield means healthcare is becoming more complicated and expensive, while the lower income residents remain protected. Moderate income families face immediate premium costs and potential doctor changes and long lines, which is both evidence in behavioral health, dental, and in primary care. And so as we look at the overarching landscape, these are some of the things that we've looked at in terms of what needs to be repaired. We do know that Governor Hochul has taken steps to protect the essential coverage for most enrollees, but there are changes that will impact some employees starting in July. And so we want to make sure that everybody is aware of that everybody is taking steps to make sure they continue to be covered. Next slide. So how do we rebuild? There are a number of things that are going on locally. Our paper will talk about actions that we believe should be taken at the federal, state, and local level. Certainly, let me take the time to talk about the RAISE Commission, which I've been involved with. There are 40 plus recommendations that came out of the RAISE Commission in 2020. And we are still working hard through the Urban League and their great work to get all of these implemented. So it's not out of sight and out of mind. And we do want to ask, for input from our community. And we also want to ask those who want to join us in trying to implement that. And we just got a new renewed agreement with the county where we can not just will not have a standing committee in the legislature, but we have the opportunity to have a better relationship through the county to get some of the things that our community needs done through that venue. So thank you, and we look forward to answering your questions. Thank you, Shannon, for putting that interest form in the chat.
Okay, Sister Beth.
Right. So I want to start by saying how fortunate we are to have a major caring community for our persons who are homeless. There's a major umbrella organization, Partners Ending Homelessness, who relates to national level legislation, advocacy, funding opportunities from the federal government, and works on a lot of coordination with local groups and assistance with coordinating funding opportunities. The second thing, of course, is I'm sure you're all well aware of, we have a massive network of shelters and food pantries and clothing programs and all kinds of things with volunteers and donors all over. And I'm sure some of you are part of that. So we're very, very fortunate. I have been part of the Homeless Services Network, which is meets monthly and is another coordinating agency with all kinds of information, sharing of information, learning from each other. They do certification for people going into the field, and then for people like me who just wants more information about the whole thing. And they have an annual meeting, which is coming up the end of the month, on Friday, end of the month, where you got all kinds of information. So what's on this slide is one of many, many slides of information. But this shows what reviewing the past and current situation with our persons who are homeless. And you see that the highest count, and this is a point in time, national point in time count that happens, and these agencies move together to go out in the streets and find out who's homeless, and Partners Ending Homelessness leads us. And this does not include what they call couch surfers, those who are staying with family or friends. So these are people and some are sheltered, so that's why you see people living outside. They're not having any shelters. The others would be in shelters at a point in time. So that's a slide. Now, the thing is, a lot has been happening in this community. So this is the time to ride the wave to help out. So service supervisors, there's a major approach to encampments that was happening, which service providers, the agencies, I call them, were concerned about. So there's been a lot of collaboration, and now there's much more humane closure protocols for encampments. And not that they're places that they can all go to, because they're not, even if they're ready to go to some place, we don't always have enough beds to fit a particular situation of the person. And there's the email, you can get a hold of Partners Ending Homelessness. There's a newsletter they send out on a regular basis, and the website is just full of all kinds of information. And you can help with advocacy efforts by looking at that. The new HUD grant, the last HUD grant, there was a lawsuit against something, as we know, there are all these lawsuits. against that. So the last grant was not out of this new administration. And there are many, many changes. They're defunding some of our local programs that are working. And they're adding a thing I've been very involved in, I'll mention that a bit, is seniors. The increasing number of seniors becoming homeless. 1 in 5 seniors in this country are becoming homeless because of all the other things that are happening with defunding. So that grant right now is in process, and I'll mention that at the end. And then all kinds of collaboration. Now you call people to help you with this or that. I mean, it's a marvelous, marvelous community of care. And then part of the repairing is improve the coordination efforts and also the healthcare connections. As you know, one of the problematics is people leaving hospitals with no place to go, needing some kind of interim care. So a lot more needs to happen there. And vulnerable populations like those suffering from trauma, people leaving prisons, as I said, the people leaving hospitals. And then the Genesis House closed for youth. That was a major problem with places for youth to go. Center for Youth has moved in with responding to some of those needs, but not all of those needs. And then I keep bringing up at the meetings I'm part of is, there are faith community, other donors out there that want to help. There are private monies that maybe can be leveraged to help in some of these situations. So we keep on trying to have meetings of information for that. And you see the Rochester model. You probably know that President Melendez issued a 300-page report on homelessness in our area. And he cites many models, as many models have been cited for me. And I keep using the word, let's get the Rochester model together, take the best of those other models, but what's our style and how is it we work together? So under some of the specific things, part of these papers are actionability. How can people be involved? So Peace Village, I got all the information too many years ago. This will be the only sanctioned encampment once everything is finalized. So there are all kinds of opportunities before, and the contract hasn't been signed. So the minute the contract's signed, I'm going to be meeting with the service provider and see how volunteers and other people can be helping with this Peace Village, which is a site off Broad Street. And then the homeless outreach team, I've been part of that from the beginning. We go out every Thursday and go to encampments, go to the transportation center, all kinds of places where the community police say there's a need for the given day. So we're doing a lot of work there in terms of getting protocols together and an orientation program. And again, if people are interested in any of the above, put it in the chat and I'll make sure that you get information on any of these things. I may happen to meet a gentleman outside the transportation center, and the agency said we can't take care of him. So I called Emery Cook from Lifespan because he was a senior, and therein began a very, very interesting, worthwhile, something's going to happen process with heads of Catholic Family Center, Jewish Family Services, DHS is there, all kinds of other people are there to develop a serious continuum of care for older adults, these 1 in 5 that are going to be homeless. So we continue to meet, and we're having a meeting on the grant itself, because one of the points of this, the collaboration toward this HUD grant, will be meeting this need for older adults. And we're going to have a couple of sessions on that for the general population, then actually looking at the grant itself and what the gaps are and what's needed. Also, as part of this, we're developing a pilot with House of Mercy, who takes everyone in, don't worry, beyond sanctions and so on and so forth. The Project Reach goes there once a week, and we're trying to get volunteer healthcare professionals to be on call the rest of the days, and also to provide funding for the hospitality beds, which are not covered by DHS, and some of them cannot be turned over to DHS because of the situation of the individual. And then, as I mentioned about advocate with Partners Ending Homelessness is a major point for that. All right, and my name is at the bottom, and you can put it in the chat. No, there's the last slide. Back to the side. This is what Nick Coulter from Person-Centered Housing Options put together for me for this, the Rochester model, and this shows from the beginning to end what can happen. Now, of course, in the midst of all this, as you go through this model, there are gaps and there's problems with funding and so on. We do have a model, and I have that available. There is a model of continuum of care, period, for vets, if the vets accept to enter the continuum of care, and some people do not, but we do have that model if anybody's interested in looking at it. So again, I'm looking for people to be more involved, to be interested, want to know more about this, go out with the hot team on some kind of basis. So just inform me about that and I'll make some connections for you. So now Jenna is on.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jenna Cohen. I'm a member of the subcommittee for immigration. And like Sid said earlier, I wanted to thank the other co-authors of our section of the paper, in particular Jim Morris, who couldn't be here today. I want to start with paraphrasing a quote from Reagan, actually, that immigration is a strength of our country and aligned with our history and our values. So let's go to the first of review. So review for us is, painting a picture of the current landscape, indiscriminate and brutal enforcement targeting all immigrants, regardless of how they got here, dismantling of legal immigration pathways, trampling of legal rights and legally established processes that have been long held, and the crushing impact on families and community and our economy. Next slide. For resist, we're really pushing back on immediate threats, which is genuinely just upholding the rule of law and due process, ensuring safety and security of our vulnerable neighbors. And we want to be against politicized rhetoric that dehumanizes and scapegoats immigrants. Under the repair section of our paper, now we're pivoting more toward building an immigration system that is reflective of our values, restoring family unity, reestablishing safe havens, promoting fairness and shared interests. Next slide. I'm going fast just for the sake of time. I apologize. So our last section, the rebuild, what does it look like, the new way of doing things? We're really calling to action our legislators. On the federal front, we're asking for comprehensive immigration reform that is long overdue. This overhaul is long overdue. The Dignity Act has some merits and reflects a lot of the compromise between enforcement and benefit, but the pathways to citizenship for those it would allow are too long, and it would create a permanent underclass of residents that had no pathway to a green card or citizenship, and that's not acceptable. On a state level, we're supporting New York for All Act and pointing out that our governor's own version, which is local cops, local crimes bill, isn't strong enough. And we're supporting dignity, not detention as well. On a municipal level, we're asking for an expansion of sanctuary declarations to places outside the city, and school district declaration of safe places and an assertion of their rights under FIRMA. And then lastly, individual action. What can you do? Reaching out to newcomers in our neighborhoods, learning the children's names of the people who live around you, getting involved in mutual aid support, participating in new American organizations, or just generally speaking out against injustices. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenna and everyone. We can probably stop sharing the slides, but we have a few minutes. So I didn't see any questions pop up in the chat, but if anyone has a question, a comment, feedback, thank you for seeing the applause and stuff like that. Thank you, everybody. I hope that this conversation resonated with you. And please, if there's anything that you want to share or, like I said, feedback, please go ahead. Just use the raise your hand button so we can recognize you. No questions from anyone? So that means we were really comprehensive in what we talked about, and everyone agrees with everything we said. So that when we talk to our elected officials, we can say we talked to 60 people on Friday, June 5th, and they all agreed with us. Oh, I love that festival. I see you nodding your head. Thank you. Connor, I see your hand raised.
This is an amazing beginning, and I really am pleased to hear and see all of this. Um, and I want to know what the plans are for the next step. As you know, Project 2025 had the real nitty-gritty on how to get it done. And I'm hoping that we will build some of that too. And I want to know how we can help you. So I guess that's my question.
Connor, thank you so much for that. So one thing we said in the beginning, right, because your point is accurate. Project 2025 had 40 years, was 40 years in the making. And so this was not an attempt to try to respond to Project 2025, but it really was a call for us to say, you know, what do we need to do for Monroe County, right? And so that's our focus. We can't cover the state, the country, but we do have some power of our voice and will in Monroe County. So our next steps, we wanted to get this thought paper out. We wanted to get community feedback. Again, to say that it wasn't just a few of us in the room that worked on this, but we really did vet this in multiple ways. And you've heard Sid and the other speakers talk about the various ways that they vetted this with other community members. And now we'll be speaking with our elected officials over the summer on a weekly basis, talking with each of them as well as other community leaders to discuss the calls to action that are in this thought paper and to get their sign on and agreement. And if they're not in agreement, to at least understand why and maybe even get some advice from them on how we can strengthen it or what it would take for them to get to agree. So this is being used as a discussion topic, but really one that can inform elected officials on what community members truly want.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that question.
Dr. Lucas, if I could just add that we have a Project 2020, if you will, which is the Raise Commission report, which had a list of recommendations. I believe it's rockraise.org that has those recommendations, and the Urban League has undertaken the challenge to ensure that that's just not a book on a shelf. And so the Urban League is continually working to institute those. And that would be in addition to what the Urban League is doing with the papers that will be coming out.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And you know, just to speak to Raise, 48% of the recommendations that were listed in the Raise Commission have already been implemented. So there's been a lot of progress just on that, but there's a lot more to do. And so where there is overlap, we are, you know, bringing those Raise recommendations into this work as well. A lot of them are at the state level, some are at the federal level. So we don't want to leave those behind. To Dr. Green's point, we are continuing to lift those up. But we're also recognizing that Raise was in 2020 and we're in 2026 with a whole list of new issues, right? Immigration was not an issue in 2020 when we wrote the Raise recommendations. Homelessness was not a big of issue as it is now, as it was in 2020. So we do also want to recognize the new areas of focus and lift those as well. So thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Green. So I see we're at 12:59. I don't see any other hands raised or see any other questions in the chat. For those of you, this was your first speaker series. Thank you for coming. I definitely hope we see you again. For those of you who have been here before, thank you for your continued support. And we hope that this is content that you find valuable, and we will continue to keep these going each month. So we will see you next month, where our speaker will be Shara May. You'll be getting the link to register for that. But in the meantime, wish you all a wonderful rest of the month. Enjoy the weather. It's supposed to last for a while. And happy Independence Day, because that's coming up on July 4th. Our next meeting will be July 10th. Take care, everyone.